He will forever be remembered as Tevye, the lovable milkman from Fiddler on the Roof. For the Israeli actor Topol, who died on Thursday aged 87, the role utterly defined him. As well as the 1971 Hollywood film adaptation, for which he received an Oscar nomination, he played the same character in various stage musicals more than 3,500 times, most recently in 2009. At the time of the 1971 Academy Awards, he had been on active service with the Israeli Army but was granted special permission to attend the ceremony in Los Angeles, where he was beaten to the Oscar by Gene Hackman in The French Connection. The catchy numbers he sang in the musical film, such as If I Were a Rich Man, To Life and Do You Love Me?, all delivered in that rich baritone voice of his, still resonate today, more than half a century later. And his role as a Jewish father trying desperately to maintain his people's cultural traditions in Imperial Russia, combined with more than a few folkish witticisms, earned him huge respect across the Jewish community and well beyond. Traditions, traditions. Without our traditions, our lives would be as shaky as "The Fiddler on the Roof," was one of his more famous lines. The Israeli President Isaac Herzog paid tribute to Topol as one of the giants of Israeli culture, describing him as a gifted actor who conquered many stages in Israel and overseas, filled the cinema screens with his presence and above all entered deep into our hearts. Born in Tel Aviv, now in Israel, but back then part of Mandatory Palestine, on September 9, 1935, Chaim Topol grew up in a working-class neighborhood in the south of the city, the son of a plasterer and a seamstress. As a youngster he was interested in becoming an artist. His primary school teacher spotted his theatrical side, however, and encouraged him to perform in school plays and read stories out loud in class. His first professional performances were as part of an entertainment troupe in the Israeli Army in the 1950s, where he met his future wife, another troupe member, Galia Finkelstein. In October 1956, just 2 days after they were married, he was mobilized by the army, so that he spent his honeymoon entertaining troops in the desert. Following that, he and Galia lived on a kibbutz, where he worked in the garage and she in the kitchen. Together they raised 3 children, Omer, Audi, and Anat. With his friends, Topol established a kibbutz theater group. Galia once recalled how her husband was always a huge and vociferous presence on the stage. "So loud, that you couldn't hear the rest of us," she said. His big break came in 1963, when he was cast as the lead character in the Israeli film Salah Shabati, which won him a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination. 2 years later he starred alongside Kirk Douglas in his first English-language film, Cast a Giant Shadow. Then came a call from the producers of a stage musical version of Fiddler on the Roof, in London's West End. Having seen Topol acting as a bearded 60-year-old in Salah Shabati, they hoped he would adapt to the role. But when he turned up for audition, clean-shaven and in his early 30s, they thought they'd called in the wrong actor by mistake. "A good actor can play an old man, a sad face, a happy man," Topol explained, unperturbed. "Makeup is not an obstacle." He then proceeded to belt out all the famous songs from the musical. Unbeknownst to the producers, he had performed the role previously. The acting in between the songs proved more difficult. His English was still shaky at the time. To get round the problem, he memorized the words by listening to the original score of the musical. Years later, speaking on BBC's Desert Island Discs, he said the producers had been very brave to let me have that part. Considering that I was 30 years old, considering that my English was so limited, a vocabulary of 50 words, I still don't understand how they let me have it, he added. The show opened at Her Majesty's Theatre in February 1967, but just 4 months later Topol was called back to Israel, to serve as a reservist in the Six-Day War, where he entertained troops on the fought over Golan Heights. War quickly over, he returned to London to reprise his role, where the publicity resulting from his military service guaranteed Fiddler on the Roof became the most popular show in town. It was a celebration before the war, but afterwards, you couldn't get a ticket, Topol recalled. It was around this time that he started to be known purely by his surname Topol, as British producers struggled with the pronunciation of his first name. A few years later came the role of his lifetime, the 1971 Hollywood version of Fiddler on the Roof. Canadian director Norman Jewison had flown to London in 1968 to see Topol in his last week on the West End stage, and was so impressed that he chose him over established stalwarts such as Danny Kaye, Rod Steiger, Walter Matthau, Richard Burton, and even Frank Sinatra, all of whom had expressed interest in the part. Shot at Shepperton Studios, in Surrey, and on location in Yugoslavia, the film became the highest-grossing of 1971, received 8 Oscar nominations and won 2 Golden Globes, one of them for Topol as Best Actor. Later in his career, he appeared in more than 30 films in Israel and abroad. His more notable English-language roles include Dr. Hans Zarkov, the brilliant scientist in the 1980 version of Flash Gordon, and a year later, Milos Columbo, James Bond's ally in For Your Eyes Only. He earned the respect of many of his peers, once revealing how, in the early 1970s, he had encouraged Marlon Brando, who was depressed after a series of unsuccessful film roles. Shortly afterwards, Brando landed the part of Don Corleone in The Godfather. Over the following decades Topol would return to the stage again and again to reprise his most famous role as Tevye, his last appearance coming in 2009. He claimed he never tired of playing the poor Jewish milkman. How many people are known for one part? How many people in my profession are known worldwide? So I am not complaining. Sometimes I am surprised when I come to China or when I come to Tokyo or when I come to France or when I come wherever and the clerk at the immigration says, Topol, Topol, are you Topol? So, yes, many people saw Fiddler on the Roof, and it is not a bad thing. As well as acting, he was a keen illustrator, with work published in more than 20 books in both English and Hebrew. He also dedicated much of his time to charitable causes. The latest was Jordan River Village, a camp for children of all religions with chronic or life-threatening diseases. Topol tried hard to eschew the turbulent politics of his region. I can tell you that, in our village, Jews and Arabs and Christians and Muslims are hugging each other and it works very well when politicians are not involved, he said of his charity. I am interested in charities and I find it more fulfilling than running from one, acting, part to another. In 2015 he was awarded the Israel Prize, the country's most prestigious accolade, for lifetime achievement and special contribution to society and the state. In June last year, Topol's son, Omer, announced his father had been suffering from Alzheimer's. He died on Thursday at the family home in Tel Aviv, surrounded by his wife, his children and his grandchildren.